She didn't scream, she didn't post threads, she didn't cry on a podcast. She just said it, quietly, elegantly, publicly. And somehow it shook Meghan Markle more than 1 million headlines ever could. Madison Brudenell, 30, Canadian, mother, former Ralph Lauren model, cousin to both Prince Harry and Prince William by bloodline. She is not a royal staffer, not a tabloid pawn, not an anonymous source. She's family, and this week she made her voice heard. The world expected another silence. After all, Madison had been quiet for years. She wore white to her second wedding in 2024, a subtle nod to Meghan. She once defended Meghan's right to choose her dress to marry as she pleased to defy tradition in a palace built on it. But things change. Because now, with a single Instagram post, Madison shifted the entire tone of the conversation. Tradition doesn't always make room for truth, but truth doesn't need permission. No tags, no hashtags, no names, but everyone knew. This wasn't about dresses, this was about distance. The kind Meghan had created not from the tabloids, but from her own bloodline. From people like Madison. For years, commentators asked, if Meghan struggled so deeply with royal protocol, why didn't she reach out to those who lived it from the inside? Those who shared her identity, her biracial background, her liminal place in a house of inherited whiteness. Madison was there, born into the Mountbatten line, rooted in both British nobility and West African descent through her mother, a bridge Meghan never crossed. And now she speaks, not to betray Meghan, but to balance her, to remind the world that not every royal is cruel, not every tradition is weaponized, and not every silence is complicity. Some silences are grace until they become resistance. Madison didn't accuse, she observed. She allowed Meghan's own story to collapse under the weight of what she left unsaid. This wasn't a scandal, this was a calibration. A course correction from someone who didn't need to prove her title. She carries it in her DNA, and Meghan, she wasn't dragged, she was disarmed. By someone she could never out-title, never out-mirror, never out-maneuver. Because Madison never wanted the spotlight. She just wanted truth to find its tone again. And it did. In a caption, on a screen, backed not by followers, but by blood. There was a time when Madison Brudenell wasn't just silent, she was supportive. When Meghan Markle faced backlash for wearing white at her royal wedding, a divorced woman daring to defy protocol, Madison didn't join the critics. She emulated. On her own second wedding in November 2024, Madison walked the aisle in ivory. No press release, no speech, just a dress. But it was loud enough. A silent alliance, a quiet nod from one biracial woman in the family to another. The message then, I see you, I stand beside you. That was then. This week, that same woman posted something far less decorative. No wedding, no white, just black serif on white background. Tradition doesn't always make room for truth, but truth doesn't need permission. No name attached, but the resonance undeniable. The same hands that once chose fabric in solidarity had now chosen syntax to signal something colder. This isn't a feud, it's an unfolding. Because Madison didn't revoke her past support. She didn't contradict herself. She simply added the one thing Meghan never did: context. A reminder that truth is complex, and family isn't a one-way platform for personal redemption arcs. The British press pounced. Royal cousin breaks ranks. Silent no more, Madison's ice-cold rebuttal to Meghan. Supporter turned skeptic. But Madison didn't feed them. She's not playing the game. She already knows how to win by not trying. Because in this media hurricane, what strikes hardest is the stillness from someone you assumed was always in your corner. And Meghan, she built her narrative on isolation, on being misunderstood, on being abandoned. But Madison's quiet repositioning makes that narrative feel a little less airtight. Because now it's not the firm criticizing, not Piers Morgan ranting, not tabloids inventing. It's kin. A cousin who once stood beside her, now simply standing still, and in doing so, making Meghan look like she's been moving too loudly for too long, in a direction not even her own shadow follows anymore. Madison's caption wasn't sharp, but it was surgical. And when elegance starts acting as an editorial, people pay more attention than they ever did to microphones and memoirs. This isn't betrayal, it's alignment, not with the crown, but with complexity, with the idea that silence isn't loyalty and loyalty isn't blind. Especially not in a family that wears truth like borrowed jewelry. And Madison? She didn't drop Meghan. She just dropped the illusion that Meghan still speaks for all of them. Madison Brudenell didn't need a stage. She didn't need a Netflix deal or a primetime interview. She needed only timing and stillness, because sometimes the loudest judgment is a breath held by someone who could have spoken louder, and didn't. When Meghan Markle entered the royal narrative, she moved quickly. From actress to duchess, from outsider to insider, from newcomer to global brand. But for every step she took, there were eyes inside the House of Windsor watching. And some, like Madison, weren't watching to judge, they were watching to understand. to give Meghan room to make the royal story bigger, better, more inclusive. But that story didn't grow, it narrowed. Into memoirs, into streaming rights, into a brand that began to look less like rebellion and more like revenue. Madison never interrupted, not during the Oprah interview, not during the Spotify unraveling, not even when the palace was painted as the villain and the Sussexes as the exiled saints. But silence isn't passive, especially not when it comes from someone who shares your lineage. Because Madison wasn't just another royal. She was a woman who understood the nuances of being biracial, of being feminine, and expected to behave of being judged without ever being quoted. She lived it, she survived it, and unlike Meghan, she never turned it into merch. So when she posted her carefully phrased caption, it wasn't just a rebuke, it was a withdrawal of consent. Consent to let Meghan keep telling her story as if it spoke for them all. It didn't. It never did. And Madison the Ice Queen let that truth drip from a sentence cool as stone. She never used Meghan's name, didn't have to, because elegance in the hands of a Brudenell can cut cleaner than any tell-all ever could. The media framed it as a feud, a falling out. But how do you fall out with someone you were never truly in alignment with? Madison didn't fall out. She stepped aside, letting Meghan march forward into her own spotlight alone. This wasn't war, it was withdrawal, a final refusal to co-sign a narrative that reduced royalty to resentment and legacy to lifestyle. Because Madison isn't a disruptor, she's a curator. She doesn't throw stones. She sets the stage so silence can echo exactly where it needs to land. And that's how she delivered her cut. No blade, no blood, just a caption that turned a duchess into an island. Meghan Markle built her brand on voice. The interviews, the podcasts, the Netflix deals. She narrated her journey out of the palace with polished control and emotional precision. But now when Madison Brudenell speaks without speaking, Meghan says nothing. And for the first time, it doesn't feel like strategy. It feels like absence. In the past, her silence was a tool. Calculated, curated. She knew when to pause, when to hold back to let the drama build, when to drop a quote that echoed through headlines. But this silence, it doesn't echo, it evaporates. Because the narrative isn't hers anymore. When Madison posted "The world looked to Meghan," would she clap back? Would she reclaim the frame? Would she remind everyone who the Duchess is? She didn't. No post, no public appearance, no unnamed source. Nothing, and in that nothing, Madison's words multiplied. Silence when you no longer control the room isn't mystique, it's vulnerability. And Meghan, for the first time in years, is being read not as the author of the moment, but as a subject in someone else's story. Because what do you say when someone you never expected to lose simply steps away? Not to expose you, just to stop protecting the version of you they once quietly defended. Meghan didn't fall, she faded. And the woman who once turned palace walls into pulpits is now watching a cousin, a quieter duchess, redefine the script without ever asking for a mic. There's no rage, no scandal, no front-page expose. Just the image of Meghan still draped in PR silk, finding the spotlight less willing to follow when the bloodline turns its gaze elsewhere. Because silence when it isn't backed by story doesn't hold. It leaks, and now the leak isn't from the palace. It's from within the narrative Meghan once owned. And she can't seem to patch it. King Charles didn't answer. Not when the jam arrived, not when the headlines spun, not when commentators whispered about reconciliation or weakness or betrayal. But that was the problem, because in the absence of a response, a vacuum formed. And into that vacuum, Meghan stepped. She didn't make noise, she made space. Space for speculation, for doubt, for a kind of influence that doesn't shout its stains. And that more than any press interview was the move that cut deepest. Because in royal wars, it's not who speaks loudest. It's who chooses when to speak and what their silence says when they don't. Meghan has mastered both. Now Charles stands in a palace more fragile than ever. Not because the walls cracked, but because the public can sense the quiet isn't strength anymore. It's uncertainty. It's fatigue. It's a crown with no voice left to defend it. And so the question no longer rests on what Meghan meant. It's why no one could stop her and why she knew they wouldn't try. She didn't demand re-entry into the royal fold. She reminded them that even outside the gates, she can reach inside and touch the nerves they pretend aren't frayed. The silence is over, but the war isn't loud. It's layered, it's cold. It's fought with gestures, with timing, with knowing when a whisper hits harder than a speech. And now, as the dust settles around a box of jam, the nation doesn't just ask what's next for Meghan. They ask, what's left of Charles? And who, if anyone, is still guarding the throne? Now it's your turn. What does silence mean in this war of legacy? Erken Team Meghan, a woman exiled but not erased. She chose the moment. She controlled the frame. Cyrus Team Charles, a monarch under siege who deserves peace, not PR chess. He stayed silent out of dignity. Quinchothan Team William, the heir forced to watch a narrative reassemble while the crown hesitates. Tsirs team narrative. The game isn't about family anymore. It's about whoever controls the story, and silence is just another move. Because in this royal drama, the lines are redrawn not by declarations, but by who dares to speak when no one else can.